Welcome to the FEI Icons podcast. Nobody becomes an icon by staying comfortable. These are the moments that stretch them and shape them. Real stories, real strategies, real leadership. The titles are public. The turning points were private. Until now.
I'm Heather Cole, finance leader, executive coach, and proud member of FEI. My goal is simple. Take the stories behind the titles and turn them into lessons you can use. If you've ever looked successful on paper but felt the weight of, am I doing this right? You're in the right place. Stories, strategy, leadership. Let's get into it. Welcome to the FEI Icons podcast. I'm Heather Cole, and today we're talking with Dana Bober, a transformational finance leader who spent more than 3 decades at Ernst & Young building a career that spans audit, advisory, and leading large-scale finance and accounting change. Dana has worked at the intersection of strategy and execution, helping leaders translate big visions into real operational roadmaps, especially when the stakes are high and the stakeholders map is complicated. And she brings a global lens to leadership, how to earn the trust, build alignment, and communicate the why across different cultures and working styles. We also get into the reality of AI in finance and how it's accelerating change, what it means for talent development, and why leaders who embrace AI will shape the future, and the ones who don't, won't. Plus, Dana's stepping into a new chapter of impact as she serves on the board of Girl Rising, an organization advancing girls' education and empowerment globally. If you've ever struggled with getting strategy to stick, leading change through influence instead of authority, or navigating your own next chapter, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Dana, I am so excited to kind of talk to you today about your journey. But before we get started, why don't you give us all a little background on yourself?
Thank you, Heather, and thank you for having me here. I'm so honored to be a part of your podcast, so thanks for that. My name is Dana Bober. I actually have spent my full career with Ernst & Young, so that's over 3 decades, so a long time. I might be a part of a dying breed there. And I really kind of ran the gamut between, started out in audit, focused on financial services for a very long time, and made some changes between audit and consulting, a little bit of both. And then starting about 8 years ago, I was asked to lead our financial accounting advisory group, which was great. Such a wonderful experience, really being in charge of the strategy and running the P&L, and a great learning experience and a whole lot of fun. And then as of July 1 of last year, I decided to step away from EY and am looking at my next chapter now, which is super exciting. And during all that, I also have 2 beautiful daughters, one who has graduated from college last year, one who's about to graduate this year. So got to add in the proud mom piece of of life there too.
Oh, I'm sure it's definitely deserved. So, Dana, you mentioned that you moved from audit to consulting and so forth. I'd love to hear more. I mean, the audit world is so structured, and then you move into consulting and strategy, and now it's like a whole new world. Maybe you can help us explain that transition, maybe something you just discovered along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And I honestly, throughout my career, kind of flipped between the two, the audit and the consulting and advisory piece. And I really felt that one made me absolutely better at the other. So to your point, with audit, you need to understand kind of bare bones, nuts and bolts, how things work. Roll up your sleeves, really get into detail. You're working to provide the end of the day, an opinion, and to make sure that things are working and the controls are appropriately in place. And you really have the opportunity as a result of that to understand how the business works and what things are going well and what things can be improved. And being able to take that knowledge and move that to the consulting and advisory side to help folks with okay, now I need to implement a new accounting standard, or I really am looking to do something different to help my financial statement close process really be more efficient, or add some technology or AI into this particular process, and think a little bit differently about it. The ability to have seen that, multiple times on the audit side and kind of take that over to advisory and consulting, I felt was fabulous, right? Because it helped me think in different ways and it helped me really leverage from one to the other. And then having those consulting skills to bring back to my audit clients to be able to think very practically and to help understand, okay, this is how other people are handling different situations also was super helpful. I really felt both really lent to the other and helped me as a professional to give more back to my clients and to give to my teams and help them to kind of learn how to think both strategically and kind of broadly as a consultant, but also be able to get there into the details and understand what's working well and what needs to be enhanced.
I never really thought of it that way because I've always thought of them as two different worlds, like in my own brain, right? But I love how you're saying basically that in audit, you're understanding the nuts and bolts and how everything works, right? And then in the kind of more strategic side, you're thinking, what are we doing next? How are we solving the pains of our clients? But you have such a vision of what's feasible, what's doable with the tools that you have within your company already. Would you
That's right.
agree? Yeah, that's
Yeah, I think that's right, and it helps you to not only talk up here at that strategic level, but also think about, okay, well, then what's next? How do we implement? And what are the challenges that happen in the day to day that we need to make sure we're thinking about and facing right now so that we can start to articulate our roadmap?
I love that because as an executive coach, what I see a lot of times is the executives have the strategy, but then the people that are tasked with implementing that strategy just laugh. They're like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. We're just
Yeah.
going to wait till they realize this, right?"
Right.
Maybe you can help me understand in your experience what is the secret sauce of getting that strategy to get executed and do it efficiently.
Oh, well, that is the age old question, right? I think on that front, the first thing I'll say is nobody does anything alone, right? I mean, you really need to be thinking about what is the team that needs to be put in place to really think through how that strategy needs to be discussed. What are we really talking about from a vision standpoint in a way that resonates with a whole bunch of different stakeholders, right? I mean, from your background, I'm sure you do, you think about this all the time, right? And those stakeholders they could be clients, they could be regulators, they could be peers, they could be honestly your CEO that you need to make sure is sold on this strategy as well, right? And then there are all the folks within the team, from the people that just started yesterday to the people that have been around for 3 decades, and what they want to know and understand and what it means to them will be different. So being able to articulate that and think through that is so very important, because at the end of the day, what people want to know is, what does it mean for me, right? So I think that piece of understanding how do you articulate the strategy is so important. And then making sure you have people on your team that can really poke those holes around, okay, from an implementation standpoint, what is the roadmap and what is the process that we need to move through to operationalize this? And who do we need to get on board besides that, implementation team to help us think through the many roadblocks, most likely that every single one of us finds as we try to create change, right? Creating change can be an amazing, amazing tool, right? And that's what I've loved about so much of what I've done, in my background and my career. It's fun and it can be really exciting, but it takes time and it takes really listening to people and thinking through what are those areas and issues that we're going to really have to put in front of us and start to get to the detail of how do you overcome each one, and always at the same time coming back to that vision of what does this mean to us collectively as a whole and to the individual, so we can see what tomorrow should look like.
You said a little nugget there that I wrote down, and you said it was about listening to people. I want to kind of back up and maybe highlight that a little bit because I too, in all the projects I've done over the years, right, have found that the secret to influence or persuasion to change comes with people feeling like they've been heard. Maybe you can share like your experience. How do you get people? Because telling them the strategy and everything's not enough, right? because they don't believe it's their own.
Right.
How can a leader that stepped in, maybe let's say they came up through accounting and now they're the CFO. And as you know, when you step into different roles, everything switches. The skills that got you there are not necessarily
Are not the ones that are continuing. So
right.
true.
Suddenly you're this leader that has to be persuasive and influence change and tell people the way things are going to go. What kind of words of wisdom can you give us around that?
Yeah. Listening, as you said, is so key. And I think that the more you can share the ideas that, you're thinking about as you're going through the strategy, not at the end game, but as you're moving through the journey to articulate that strategy, have those conversations with the folks that are other influencers, quite frankly, right? So because those individuals will then be able to go back to their teams and say, "Listen, I was in the boat," right? So you want to have the right people in the boat with you and working through the journey with them. At the end of the day, not everybody's going to agree, right? So we all need to understand and know that. And I think what's really important to me as a leader has always been authenticity, honesty, clarity. I say what I do what I say, right? And being very open as to what those decisions are that might not be what everybody loves, as well as the decisions that are easy and everybody loves them, right? And when you're making those decisions or taking that path that not every person is on board with, which will happen, to make sure you go to those folks that think a little bit differently and explain the why and explain you were heard. I felt that that was a very important point that you made. Here's what I think, how we're going to mitigate that challenge that you brought forward, which is a very good challenge. But this is the road we're going to go down. And I really want your support as we go down that road. That way you've heard, you've listened, you've explained, why the direction is perhaps a bit different than that person wants, would most likely have desired for their own self or their own team. And then you're able to kind of move forward with saying, but I need you to be on board here. And that gives that person a choice to say, I'm with you, let's go. Or the person can say, you know what, that's not the road I want. That's not the vision I see. And that's not where I want to be. And they can make their own decisions from there as to, what they want to do next. But keeping the people in the boat and really just being very super open and having that kind of dialogue, I think is super important.
So you said the magic word that I so love to accentuate, and that is the why. You said it several times. You said explaining the why. And what I found in implementing large projects is oftentimes those people that might not be as eager to jump in the boat, as you say, once you explain the why, they kind of have this epiphany and they're like, oh, that's why we're doing it. And if it's aligned with kind of what their beliefs and values and ideas are, oftentimes those are the people that come up with the greatest ideas to slightly tweak it to make it even better because they do have a different perspective than us.
Absolutely. I think that is so true. And I think we've all been on the other side of this too, right? So we've led through it and we've been on the other side. And having been even, I've had many a boss who, with the feedback that I provided, have we've agreed and they've moved in the way that I'm very pleased to. And once in a while, not, right? Once in a while, I would have much preferred a different answer, right? Than the one. But when those individuals talk to you about, okay, this is the why, and we need to be on board and move forward in this way. Like, okay, I would have preferred that not be where we moved, but I understand it and I support you, and let's go, right? So I think we can see it, right, when we look at
Yeah.
both sides.
Well, it's interesting you say because I had a little flashback, a little one of those moments of my youth, right, where a boss had explained the why and something, and I was totally not in alignment. And
Yeah.
literally a week later, I quit, right? But a lot of people, I think, leaders that I know, sometimes when team members quit, they take it kind of personally, right? Like, I don't know, maybe as women, we're a little wired a little bit differently. But what I've found is even with my own quitting, that was best for both the organization and for me.
That's right. Yeah, especially if you weren't aligned with where the path and the next steps were. You can't give it your 100% if you're not feeling that. And again, you don't need to agree with every aspect of every decision that's being made, but you have to agree with the foundations, right? And believe that that's the best general path forward and be able to get behind it.
Yeah. Now, you worked on a global basis, right? Now, I can only imagine that when you take these changes that you're trying to make and you're trying to persuade people to get on the boat and be influential, that once you enter into the world of global and you're dealing with different cultures, different belief systems, different value systems, there's a whole nother level of challenge there. Maybe you can share some of your experiences around that.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very true statement. I think at the heart of it, what I have found very interesting about working globally is at the very heart, people want to be respected and people want to be valued and people want to be heard. Okay. And then you are totally correct as to the details of what that means differs, right, from place to place and how people show up in demonstrating that they're looking to be valued will be different from a colleague that I'll speak to in Japan versus a colleague that I'll speak to in England, right? So I think that whole concept we talked a little bit about before, which is the listening and watching and asking advice, because you'll have throughout anybody's journey, our career, I've been very lucky to have many different mentors and mentors from all over the globe and being able to ask the question of, okay, even when come out of a meeting, you say, "Would you all think about that?" Right? Like, did we achieve what we were looking to achieve? Let's talk about what we wanted to achieve and what we did achieve, and how we're feeling. And I think having those types of dialogues one on one with different individuals that again have influence and that have different perspectives and are diverse in their backgrounds is super helpful to even show some blind spots that you might have. Not you, Heather, but me. Any of
Yeah,
us
me too. Mine are probably bigger.
blind spots that I might have. And because that's what you want to know, right? You want to know what those blind spots are and you want to continuously be growing and developing and listening and understanding, oh, okay, that's what I need to do a little bit differently, or I need to be able to demonstrate a bit more in that particular setting that I have command of the situation, where in this particular situation, I need to more demonstrate that I'm being collaborative. Of course, you always want to have command of the situation and be collaborative, but what are those aspects of leadership that needs to show up most in the particular room that you're standing in?
So I love that idea. I wrote a meeting retrospective, like especially when you're doing a global meeting, right? I remember a time I was doing a presentation to people from all over the world. There was about 50 people, and afterwards I asked like, "How did that go?" Well, we had an interim break. I think it was after the first session, and they're like, "Girl, you need to slow down." Like, and I get excited, and they're like, "Everyone in the room is translating." And you're all energized and going so fast. I was like, okay, just give me the signal like water skiing, right?
Right.
Faster, slower. So I totally love that idea. And I think that's a lot of people spend a lot of time in meetings that are wasted because they didn't do a meeting
Calibration, right?
I love that. Calibration, I'm gonna steal that. Now, you also led a lot of transformation. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about AI. What do you see the future is with AI? Because to me, change is coming. It is like drinking from a fire hose of what's happening right now. But I'd love to hear your take on it, especially on a global level.
Yeah. Um, Change is here and change is coming, right? And it's coming fast. In so much of what the future looks like, how even our talent, how do we think about making sure that folks have the right background and skills, and particularly in finance. I obviously finance accounting is so important, but we need technology skills, we need AI skills, we need these individuals to really come together with those skill sets. And I think, many people have said this, but I'll say it too. I don't believe that AI will take away all, jobs, right? All human jobs. However, I do believe that humans that do not embrace AI, those folks probably will have their jobs taken. So I do think we need, just like always, we need to adapt. It's so funny because I got this question asked recently, Heather, about what is the most change in technology that you've experienced, and how have you handled that, or what have you? And I just sat back and I thought, okay, when I started, not to sound so old, but we didn't even all have computers, right? I mean, we had fax machines instead of emails. I had a Palm Pilot, right? That turned into a BlackBerry. That turned it. So I think we sometimes underestimate what we've all gone through, right? Even now, right? And how much life has changed, and what we do every day has changed. That is not at all to diminish the power and the change that's going to happen with AI. I think it is, and it will continue to be quite powerful. We know how to do it, right? So I think what we need to do is put our big kid hats on, right? And lead through the change, make sure we're putting humans at the center, that we're respecting what needs to happen to ensure that this change management goes well, which is to get people comfortable with the tools and make sure that they understand the why, all right? And where the future looks like, which means you need to have a vision, right? So that piece is very important, right, for our finance leaders and our CEOs and all our folks to be able to articulate what that vision is, and then let's move. We can move from there.
You do a great almost parallel or a comparison, right? Back in, God, I say 80s, I had like the compact computer that had it looked like a sewing machine, and it had like a little sort a little tiny screen. That was my first computer. And back then my parents had a software company, so I was training people how to use computers at a very young age. And I remember everyone being terrified that they were going to lose their job because this PC is going to take their jobs. And I think you're right. We're back at that place. Like history's just repeating it in another form and saying, you're going to become more efficient. You'll be able to do things faster, right?
Yep.
And I think you're right. Maybe we need to take a look back at those times and say, how did we adapt to change? We explained to people and empowered them. We taught them.
Yes. Empower them. And I mean, I think you said this before. You know, our there's so much knowledge out there, right? And so much, like, just kind of excitement, right? Especially with our more junior folks of what this can mean and what we can do, and to be able to innovate and to have everybody at the table think from an innovative standpoint of how we can make this change. That can excite people, right? That goes back to change being exciting.
I absolutely agree. I geek out on AI. Like, I'm up early, geeking out, learning, taking classes in Asia on what else you can do with it. And I think those people that are going to embrace this technology and say, I want to learn. It's scary. I'm gonna look stupid. I'm gonna do things wrong,
Yep.
but I'm gonna go for it, right? And I think there's something about the culture, right, that you have to create that safe environment for people to do that.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I love that. Now, let's talk about your next chapter, which is always the fun part. So, you're currently on a board of, correct me if I'm wrong, Girls Rising. I love the name. Tell us more about that organization.
Yes, I love Girl Rising. It is a not-for-profit organization, just recently merged with another fabulous girls education and empowerment not-for-profit called She's a First. So, Girl Rising focuses on educating young girls, as well as really helping them to find their voice and using the power of storytelling really to change the way the world thinks about girls' education globally. So. It's a great group, a great group of folks who have a very mission-based focus, and I love being involved with it. Feel very honored.
Wonderful. Now, I heard you're also looking potentially for a corporate board position. What in your ideal world, which is that one?
You know, over the past more than 3 decades, have had a lot of diverse experience, with, as we talked about before, really on the audit side, with understanding risk, with understanding controls, with understanding how to enhance, finance, departments, et cetera, from the consulting side, and then moving into running my own business thinking through strategy and P&L and operations and how to get people on board and all that kind of good stuff. So I feel like my background is one that I've been lucky enough to have a lot of diverse experiences. And at this point, I'm really looking to give back, right? And think about how can I take that knowledge and be able to really help others kind of think through what their next stages are, help others with that concept of asking questions around risk and what does their vision and strategy really mean, and how are they moving forward in that regard, and really creating that long-term value. So, you know, for me, I'm at a point in my chapter where I'm able to really think about where can I do that serves, the purpose and feels good about what I'm interested in where I'm interested in adding value. So, um, that's going to be a community type of group that really cares about their people and has a good culture, and a place that I can add value and kind of move to the next level along with that organization.
I love that because we were talking earlier, when we were coming up in the ranks, there wasn't there wasn't a lot of women in finance, there wasn't a lot of women in tech, and I think it was just a different world. And I love that as we do these podcasts, everybody I've been interviewing kind of says the same thing, that they're at that place in life to help others, to mentor, and to give back. And I think that's what makes people like you unique. And I totally understand why Financial Executives International made you an icon, because it's that leadership and mentorship. Now, if you had to mentor yourself, say we went back in time, we hopped in our time machine and we went back, let's say 20 years, what would you tell your younger self that you now know?
It's so interesting. I think the number of years makes a difference. So 20 years. Okay, my 20-year ago self.
Okay, I have to admit something here, Data. I said 20 years and I realized we're still in the 2000s.
I know. I think at that point of my career, I understood the power of relationships and the importance of relationships. But I would still stress that even more, right? To my junior self, not only to understand the power of those relationships, but um, to make sure that I was creating those relationships in every aspect, right? Which I learned over time, but it's not just within, accounting and finance or what have you, right? It's folks in tech, and it's the folks in marketing, and it's the folks in across the spectrum, because having that as you're moving forward and you become a leader of different aspects, being able to create that team and have that diverse opinion is so important, and then being able to go out to people that you have relationships with to kind of test it too, right? And to kind of push at it and to say, what, I want to ask your opinion. What do you think about this? And I'm looking to pressure test things. And to be able to do that with a diverse group, different, backgrounds of people, I think is just so, so important, both within your organization and outside your organization. And so I would say the power of relationships. And I would say thinking through not just creating them, but learning how to activate them. Because I think as women, sometimes we're super good at creating these fabulously trusted relationships because we're good people and we're honest and we're adding value and we get our heads down and we're working hard. And we don't always get to the how you activate the relationship when you need it. So I think I would start working with my more junior self to think through that. And it's like a bank. You want to give more than you take, right?
I call them life credit. And you do a little life credit, and then when you need help, you can like turn them in, right?
Right. Right. And I think sometimes we're a little, or I was at least a little, and I still am at times wary of asking, right, for the help.
So that is so important, and it's also been kind of a theme in this podcast with others. Is I think that coming up, I was always trying to do favors, helping people out. One, it just makes me feel good, right?
Yeah.
I'm wired to be one of those people. But what you're saying about activating it, I kind of say activating and asking. I was horrible and still work in process about asking people for help or and what I realized, and this is how it was explained to me that like shattered my world, is someone said, Heather, you're always helping others. How does that make you feel? And I said, it makes me feel amazing. That's why I do it. And they're like, do you realize by not asking, you are depriving others of feeling that way? And I had one of those epiphany moments like, oh my,
I love that.
I kind of have to remind myself of that very frequently when I'm like, who could I ask? I read in a book one time about building your own personal board of directors
Yeah.
and getting, and that's kind of the story that vision I see is getting close friends or associates in marketing and finance and tech and law and making it so that you can kind of seek their counsel or maybe even their different perspectives.
Yep.
I wish I would have had that 20 years ago as well. Like there should be a book just on that, like build that network. I'm sure there are, but yeah, excellent. So we're about out of time here, Dana. Is there any other things that you'd like to highlight, share? If you were maybe sharing this with your daughters as they enter into the work world or others, the people that come following behind us?
I think, yeah, the one other thing I'll share, especially as you said, for my daughters entering into the workforce, it makes me think about it, is just be curious. I think that is, and I imagine that's the theme as well that you're hearing coming from a lot of women, but that's what's going to allow you to stay current, right? To stay of value and to learn and develop and to keep moving in the direction that you need to go personally, but also with your organization and professionally, and really think about that. I know you and I talked about it before, but from a mind, body, soul perspective, that staying curious is just super important.
I think that's also the curiosity factor is also where you find the right rock that you can turn over and find some gems, right? Some opportunities in business, maybe markets that aren't served or dots connect differently. And all of a sudden you're like, why aren't we offering this to our clients? Or, it's
Absolutely. Those big ideas come from some of those rocks that you just happen to turn over, right? It's so true.
well, Dana, this has been a pure joy. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
If you had to recommend a great book for someone to read, what do you recommend?
Oh my
It
God.
can be fiction, nonfiction.
Well, on a heavy note, I just recently read Why Liberalism Failed, which is, I did not agree with everything in the book, but you walk out, one of those books that, I think I read it a year ago, and I still think about different things within it from time to time. So that's more, I guess, on the heavy side.
That goes to your curiosity note, though, right? Like you go in knowing that you might not agree with it.
No, no, no. You're not going to, most likely. But on a lighter note, anything written by Jonathan Franzen, amazing. So
Excellent. Well, it's been so fun to spend time with you, and we wish you the best of luck. And thank you for giving back to all those youth. Those girls are lucky to have you on the
no, thank you. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure. Thank you, Heather.
Today's conversation with Dana Bober really came down to one core idea. Strategy only matters if it survives contact with reality. And the leaders who win are the ones who can translate the vision into execution. Here are some key takeaways that I'm still thinking about. Audit and advisory aren't opposites, they're complementary. Data showed how deep operational understanding fuels better strategic decisions and how strategic thinking makes you a sharper operator. Execution starts with stakeholders. If your strategy doesn't answer, what does this do for me? For the people doing the work, it will not move the needle. Listening isn't soft, it's a lever. Bring people into the conversation early, not after the plan's already done. Lead with the why. The fastest path from skepticism to commitment is clarity, especially when the decisions aren't popular. AI won't replace leaders. Leaders who don't engage AI will be left behind. The opportunity is real, but only if you make adoption human-centered and intentional. And here's my challenge for you guys this week. Pick one strategy or initiative that you're currently driving, something that's stuck or slow or quietly getting eye rolls. Write down the why in one sentence, and then identify 3 stakeholders who will make or break execution. Ask them one of these questions. What is the biggest thing that could derail this project? And what would you change to make it work? Then do the hard part. Incorporate at least one of their inputs and name it out loud. That's how trust compounds and how movement starts. If you found value in this episode, share it with a fellow finance leader. Leave a review and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. I'm Heather Cole, and we'll see you on the next episode of the FEI Icons podcast.
Your career doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in rooms, relationships, and real conversations. So here's your next move. Expand your network through the FEI network, because the right connections increase your net worth and your impact. Plug into the programs, the people, and the community, and keep showing up until opportunity recognizes your name.